Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Ordinary Council meeting of the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale, being held on Monday, the 21st of November 2022. I declare this meeting open at 7:04 p.m. And I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the traditional land of the Noongar people, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to advise members of the gallery that the meeting is being audio recorded in accordance with council policy. If you are asking a public question or making a statement or deputation to the meeting, this will be audio recorded. Members of the public gallery are reminded that no other visual or audio recording of this meeting by any other means is allowed. Item number 1 is attendances and apologies, of which there is nil. Item number 2 is public question time. Item 2.1 is response to previous public questions taken on notice, of which there is nil. Item number 2 is public questions. Could I please ask Mr. Bill Denham from Kerricup to come forward and read your questions this evening, please?
Evening, councillors, officers. First question, at the special council meeting of 24th of October, item 7.1.1, if council had adopted the original officer's recommendation, which the majority of the council rejected in favour of option 2, what impact would that have on all councillors whose term will expire in 2025?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Denham. I'll ask the Director of Corporate Services to respond to your question, please.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, Mr. Denham. The Minister for Local Government has indicated his intention to introduce a bill to Parliament that would introduce a series of electoral reforms. The Minister has provided the option for local governments to voluntarily progress the reforms. At the 24 October 2022 Special Council meeting, the Council resolved to pursue this voluntary option. If Council had resolved to support option 1 for item 7.1.1 at the October meeting, Special Council meeting, officers would have advised the Department of Local Government the Shire did not wish to voluntarily progress the reforms. The impact of pursuing the non-voluntary pathway option as it relates to any councillor's term of office is not exact. In his correspondence, the Minister stated that he intended that the legislation he would introduce to Parliament would spill all positions. However, the impact would depend on the details of the legislation that the Minister has indicated that he intends to introduce and whether this legislation is ultimately passed as proposed by Parliament in time for the 2023 ordinary local government elections.
Thank you. Question number 2, what is the definition of a financial interest?
Thank you for your second question this evening, Mr. Denham. I will ask the Director of Corporate Services to respond to your question, please.
Thank you, Madam President. Section 5.60A of the Local Government Act 1995 defines a financial interest in the following terms. A person has a financial interest in a matter if it is reasonable to expect that the matter will, if dealt with by the local government or an employee or committee of the local government or member of the council of the local government in a particular way, result in a financial gain, loss, benefit or detriment for the person. Section 5.63 of the Act goes on to provide for exemptions to Section 5.60A.
Thank you. Question number 3, what are the rules around successful candidates who become councillors needing to disclose campaign donations, and what are the penalties for failing to accurately disclose donations?
Thank you for your third question this evening, Mr. Denham. I'll ask the Director of Corporate Services to respond to your question, please.
Thank you, Madam President. Part 5A of the Local Government Election Regulations 1997, the regulations, describes the rules concerning election gifts. The legislation in relation to this involves several elements, but in summary, a candidate must disclose gifts related to their candidature of a value of $200 or more, or cumulative gifts of $200 or more during the disclosure period within 3 days of receiving the gift. The regulations require the donor as well as the recipient to disclose the gift in question. The penalty for non-disclosure listed in the regulations is $5,000.
Thank you, President.
Could I please ask Mrs. Lee Bond to come forward and ask your questions this evening?
How many employees work at the Watkins Road transfer station? Are there any volunteers working there? If so, how many? If there are more than 2 employees, what date were the extra employees employed?
Thank you for your first question this evening, Mrs. Bond. I will ask the Director of Infrastructure Services to respond to your question.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you for the question, Mrs. Bond. There are equivalent of 3.2 FTEs, full-time equivalent employees positions based at the transfer station. 3 of these positions operate the transfer station. There is 1 part-time employee equivalent of 0.2 FTE who manages the reuse shop on weekends only. This position commenced in August 2022. We also have 2 volunteers that work at the reuse shop.
Is the Watkins Road transfer station going to become a paid entry for residents? If so, please give details of how this will function and what will the cost be?
Thank you for your second question this evening, Mrs. Bond. I will ask the Director of Infrastructure Services to respond to your question.
Thank you, Madam President. There's no plans to change the current fees and charges for the transfer station. Notwithstanding this, Council adopts the fees and charges each year as part of the budget process. However, an action in this year's corporate business plan is the Operations Center structure review, which is to undertake a detailed review of the operation services at the Shire's depot and waste transfer station to identify areas of improvements to achieve higher efficiencies. This review is currently in progress.
Why has the Jarrahdale log shop been abandoned? Who installed and paid for fencing on the grounds? This was held on until its demise. Did SJ Council make the decision to abandon this annual event?
Thank you for your third question this evening, Mrs. Bond. I will ask the Acting Director of Community Engagement to respond to your questions this evening.
Thanks for the question, Mrs. Bond. The Jarrahdale Log Shop and SJ Country Lions Fair is an annual event delivered by the Lions Club of Serpentine Jarrahdale. In May 2021, Council resolved to provide major event funding towards this event for 3 years, which included the 2021, 2022 and 2023 events. In February this year, being the 2022 year, a letter was received by the Shire advising that the Lions Club Committee voted unanimously to cancel the 2022 event, mainly as a result of the challenging restrictions of COVID-19 at that time. However, the Shire has recently been informed by the Lions Club that the 2023 event will go ahead as ordinarily delivered by the Lions Club. There remains $18,000 committed by Council to this purpose via the Major Events Funding Scheme. The SJ Lions Club successfully advocated for the installation of fencing at Jarrahdale Oval in 2016 via royalties for region funding.
Thank you, Mrs. Bond. The Local Government Act requires a local government to allow 15 minutes for public question time at ordinary council meetings. We have not reached the 15-minute mark at this evening's meeting. So we'll open public questions up to the floor this evening. Is there any public questions from members from the floor? Mr. Dyer?
Change the course of where we've been going tonight. The question I have asked the councillors, and I think I have previously brought it up at the council meeting, The bus stop on Final Soldiers at Daisy Road has been there for 48 years minimum. The walls have been replaced, but the roof leaks like a sieve. Have we got any chance of getting a replacement of the roof in the next budget?
Mr. Dial, take your question on notice because obviously it would be a budget item and funds would need to be found. So we'll take it on notice and the CEO will respond to you in writing for your question.
That shed has got 4 sheets of iron, approximately 2 metres.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson?
Councillors and everybody else. I have 2 questions. Firstly, the verge at Hopkinson Road and Abernethy Road, the weeds are this high. If you're driving a low car, you can't see around the corner. And if somebody gets hurt, is the Shire going to be responsible for it?
Mr. Tomlinson, can you please repeat which intersection, Hopkinson and?
And Abernethy Road,
Thank you.
weeds are like 3 foot high. In a low car, you can't see around the corner, so.
Thank you.
Can we get it sorted out? Or?
We will take your question on notice and I will have the CEO respond to your question. Thank you.
Second question is, taking highway extension. We received an email the other day about what's going on with it, but there's no time, no dates, nobody knows what's going on. If there any dates, public can find out as to when they're going to start doing work on it or what's going on.
We don't have any dates that we can actually put out, being a main roads project. We are working with main roads and have requested that they come to the Shire and actually hold some community forums to involve the community so that the community are fully aware of what the plan is moving forward.
Because even when you're on the website, there's no dates, nothing on there. So nobody knows what's going on. It's been going on for 4 or 5 years that I know of. Nothing's happened, so it's probably come to that hard to plan stuff and get things moving. The money's in the bank from what I understand, and the cost of this now keep going up.
Yeah, we are working with main roads to have some community forums so that community have the opportunity to ask questions and gain information.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Is there any further questions from the floor this evening? There have been no further questions from the floor this evening. Public question time is concluded at 7:17 p.m. Item 3 is public statement time. Can I please ask Joe Rossi, lead pastor from Centrepoint Church Byford, regarding item 9.1, notice of motion community funding, Centrepoint Church Christmas Carnival 2022, to please come forward.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors and officers. On Friday, December the 16th at 5 p.m, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m, Centrepoint Church will be running a free community event at Caledona Oval in Byford called the Byford Christmas Carnival. The event is for families to come along and enjoy a totally free event, which includes inflatables, water slides, face painting, a visit from Santa, a gift for every child 11 years of age and under, hot dogs, burgers, and much, much more. Over the past 4 years, we have run a Christmas breakfast on Christmas morning for those who would otherwise find themselves isolated and alone on Christmas Day. These events attracted around 250 to 300 people. Each year, we have been successful in receiving funding via the grant scheme from the local Shire, which has gone a long way in helping us put on these events. We are always truly thankful for the support and the finance. At the start of 2022, we discussed how we could make our Christmas event bigger and better for the community and identified the need for an event aimed at families, as the region's demographic has a large young family population. We decided to run the Christmas Carnival event to make it as accessible for young families as possible. The date chosen coincides with the end of the school year, so it would be a great way for the Christmas season to begin. We discussed this with local families within the area and all made comment this is exactly what the community needed. Also, with the cost of living pressures leading into Christmas this year, will be a huge blessing for our community as the entire event is totally free for those who register to attend. We set a target of 400 people to attend and applied for funding again by the Serpentine Jarrahdale's grant scheme, and we were successful in receiving an amount of $1,891.40. Centrepoint is truly grateful for these funds, which will enable us to cater for about 100 of the people who will attend the free Christmas Carnival event. We launched the event last Sunday, and in 48 hours we had to close the registrations as there was a huge demand from young families for the event. We currently have 583 registrations and another 200 on a waiting list. This has gone beyond our expectations and is amazing and shows the community need for an event like this. We put the large interest down to the cost of living pressures mentioned earlier, as well as the family aspect of this event. In order to meet the demand, we require additional funding as our aim is to make sure that no child misses out on the event, as well as their free gift. If we are successful in receiving additional funding, this will go a long way in achieving this goal. Thank you for allowing me to make this presentation. And again, we are truly grateful and appreciate the funds already donated by the Shire for our Christmas Carnival.
Thank you. Can I please ask Mrs. Lee Bond to come forward and read your statement this evening?
The last SPM, some councillors should be ashamed of their behaviour. Meetings are recorded. It is necessary to advise the listener of which councillor is speaking at all times, and long silences need to be addressed for the benefit of the listener. Agenda item 10.1.8. How many times will this matter waste the time of council just so another service station can be built just down the road from another one which has already commenced development? Corner of Thomas and Carcottage Road is a dangerous intersection. Agenda item 10.1.10. Okay. How many? No, hang on. 15. Sorry. Rainfall. How many dog exercise areas does the Shire require, and why is the Jarrahdale dog park so disgusting? Agenda item 10.1.7. When will churches start paying rates like the rest of us? I can get a half a dozen people together, call myself a church, and not pay rates. Start thinking about whose money you are wasting.
Thank you, Mrs. Bond. Item 4 is petitions and deputations. There is no petitions, but the first deputation is Jessie Dunbar of Taylor Burrell Barnett and Brian Hink of Bright Tank Brewing regarding item 10.1.2, Outer Metropolitan Outer Development Assessment Panel deferral, proposed use not listed, brewery and restaurant and associated works, lot 201 1248 Carnup Road, Serpentine.
Sorry. My name is Jessie Dunbar. I'm here from Taylor Burrell Barnett, and this is Brian Hinkley from Bright Tank in relation to item 10.1.2 on tonight's agenda for the proposed restaurant and brewery for 48 Carnup Road. The purpose of this item is simply to agree to the additional time required for the Shire to assess and re-advertise the revised plans and additional information that we recently submitted. But I thought I'd give a bit of a progress update and overview of the modified proposal. Following Council's consideration of this item back in August, our development application was presented to the JDAP on the 29th of August. The JDAP meeting garnered some really great discussion from all of those involved and resulted in our application being deferred to enable a range of matters to be resolved prior to a final decision being made. There were 9 matters identified by the JDAP to be addressed, and the project team has been working diligently to ensure each of these items are addressed and considering all opportunities to improve the development outcome for the site and ensure external impacts are minimised as far as possible. In doing so, we've required additional time to make sure each of the key concerns raised by surrounding landowners, council and the JDAP have been comprehensively addressed. This has resulted in the need for a further deferral of our application to enable the Shire to undertake the requisite steps in considering the additional information and revised plans that we submitted in early November. Public advertising is now underway and application has been re-referred to external agencies. We've made a few key changes, which we think will really help in allaying any initial concerns relating to the proposal. Most significantly, the brewery output target has been reduced from 5 million litres per year to 2 million litres per year at the ultimate capacity. This is a substantial 60% reduction in output and has considerable flow-on effects in reducing the brewery wastewater and ensuring the development operates well within the nutrient target rates for the Peel-Harvey Environmental Protection Policy. Changes to the built form include a reduction in the brewery footprint and shifting the restaurant and brewery structures approximately 130 metres northeast of the previously proposed location, which provides over 450 metres separation between the development and the nearest dwelling to the southwest of the site. Car park is proposed to be split into two separate areas to reduce the visual impact of one large expansive car park, and a significant amount of landscaping is proposed, including large trees and drainage swales around the car park. Screening buffer planting along the southern boundary of the property is proposed to enhance the existing vegetation in this area. A high-quality landscape proposal is put forward, which seeks to build upon the site's existing natural features and incorporate a mix of shade trees, native planting, screening and hardscaping elements to achieve an attractive backdrop to the restaurant whilst ensuring the development presents sensitively within its context and to neighbouring properties. The development plans and updated reporting currently being advertised addresses each of the JDAP's deferral reasons, and we welcome any further feedback from the council and local community through the consultation phase. So to summarise, we support the officer recommendation that our application be deferred to enable the submitted information to be assessed according to the Shire's planning framework and processes. Thanks for your time. If there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer as well.
Thank you. Are we going to hear from Mr. Hinkie?
Brian's just here if there's any questions that
Right, thank you very much. Second deputation this evening is from Mend Nesser of Harley Dykstra regarding item 10.1.4, proposed transport depot at lot 1012 Tunney Road, Albury.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Ahmed Nasser. I'm a town planner at Harley Dykstra. On behalf of our clients, the board in support of the officer's recommendation to council regarding item 10.1.4 on the agenda, proposed transport depot at lot 1012 Tunney Road in Albury. The proposal seeks to enable the parking of two commercial trucks associated with the distribution of non-hazardous agricultural chemicals. Trucks are to arrive loaded or unloaded at the proposed transport depot at the end of the day to be parked overnight prior to operations the following morning. Incidental storage within the poultry shed will occur in instances where goods will need to be transferred to a smaller 4-ton truck that will deliver goods in batches to locations that cannot accommodate larger trucks. This will be on an as-required basis and is incidental to the primary transport depot operation. Support for this application will see the discontinuation of the poultry farm and will ensure the obvious amenity impacts associated with poultry operations are removed and a more appropriate land use, considering the size and character of the site, is established. Existing poultry operations have air quality impacts on the surrounding locality. In comparison, the proposed land use is odorless, removing one of the key impacts on surrounding properties and providing residents with an improved amenities. Similarly, the proposed use will result in a reduced noise impacts on the surrounding locality. Noise associated with the proposed transport depot is to be limited due to the limited number of truck movements that will only occur within standard business hours, and the transfer of product or delivery by electric form. In comparison, the existing poultry operations include a number of noise generating activities, including feeder motors, feed trucks arriving outside standard business hours to pump feeds into silos, and nighttime bird collection. Proposed non-hazardous chemicals that are to be incidentally stored and distributed within the local rural area are used for agricultural activities, and therefore the proposed use is considered associated with rural pursuits, meeting the objectives of the rural zone. An environmental acoustic assessment prepared by Herring Store Acoustical submitted in support of this proposal, concluding noise received at the nearest receivers would comply with the requirements of the environmental protection noise regulations between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. The fire management plan has also been prepared by Smith Fire Consultants in support of this application. I would like to thank the Shire officers for their effort in preparing this recommendation to Council. We have reviewed the recommended conditions, which we consider to be reasonable and fair. We therefore kindly request Council move the officer's recommendation as written and approve this application. With the Shire President's permission, I'm willing to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation. Please ask Richard Burt of Fowler Group regarding item 10.1.9 West Mundijong Industrial Area discussion paper and infrastructure funding to please come forward and present your deputation.
Madam President, councillors, officers, thank you for your time. Richard Burt's my name. I'm the CEO of the Fowler Group. We recently bought land in the West Mundijong industrial area and are motivated developers, in fact, we're first stage developers of that estate, which we're very pleased to be involved in. The Fowlers have been landowners in this area for many years, following their horsing pursuits, but this is a move into the sort of development of industrial land. The feedback that we've had from would-be customers of that industrial estate is that it's pretty essential to be able to get trucks into the area, as in heavy grade trucks of a RAV4 clients. And unfortunately, as the officers know, the road is really suited for that at the moment. So the Mundijong Cargottage Road needs to be upgraded on an interim basis while other works are going on by main roads and government. So there is an item before you today that will facilitate customers being able to come into that area that the council obviously wants to see as an industrial estate. It's a brilliant bit of land in terms of having future potential. It's a large estate. It really offers a clean slate in terms of future travel corridors, housing workers in the town instead of having to travel to nearby communities to work. We'll have the people living here and working here. And naturally, the people who are going to establish those sort of industries and businesses are going to need to have access to that land. So we're very committed to undertaking that development. We don't mind being the first stage developer, but we really do need the council to support us in terms of providing the road ingress and egress for transport. So I would ask that the officer's recommendation be supported and that be favourably looked upon. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 5 is the President's report. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ordinary Council meeting for November 2022. The past month has been busy here in SJ with a particular focus on our Shire's emergency services, with bushfire season now upon us. On the 25th of October, I attended a pre-season briefing held at the Mundijong Volunteer Bushfire Brigade Station. The briefing gave volunteers from all local brigades a chance to discuss the latest information ahead of the season. It is highly encouraging to see how engaged and prepared our brigades are. I was also pleased to attend the Volunteer Firefighters Family Fun Day in Serpentine last month. The day is a great way to show appreciation for the volunteers who work so hard to keep our community safe. In keeping with the theme of emergency services, the Shire welcomes the state government's announcement that a new career fire station will be built in Cardup, with construction expected to commence in mid-2023. This announcement follows Council's decision at our October meeting to agree in principle on a self-supporting loan to deliver the Oakford Bushfire Brigade project. Providing new and up-to-date infrastructure to support our local firefighting services is vital, and these Cardup and Oakford projects will significantly benefit our community. I encourage all SJ residents to prepare for this bushfire season. More information on this can be found on the Shire's website. Moving on, I was thrilled to attend a pair of essential milestones within our community over recent weeks. Jarrahdale celebrated its 150th birthday with a great showing of community pride and live entertainment at the Jarrahdale Heritage Mill. At the same time, Keysbrook residents gathered to mark the 100 years of the local cricket pitch. Both events were great ways to showcase the history and heart of our Shire. Congratulations to all involved in organising these events. The SJ Food and Farm Fest was once again a smash hit earlier this month, shining the light on our vast agricultural sector. Our leading equine community was also on display with the WA state jumping titles held at the Serpentine Sports Reserve on the 23rd of October. It was great to attend and see the fantastic talent at one of our premier equine facilities. Event season will continue next month with the Shire's Christmas festivities, including the Christmas street party to be held on Patterson Street outside the Administration Building on 9th of December. The Shire's website shows a full schedule of Christmas events. I want to close tonight by congratulating the Serpentine Jarrahdale RSL for hosting a successful Remembrance Day service in Byford earlier this month. The service was a fitting way to commemorate the loss of Australian lives from all wars and conflicts, and is always touching to see our community gather on this day. As always, my full calendar can be viewed on the following pages. Item 6 is declaration of councillors' and officers' interests. We have a number of declarations this evening, the first being Councillor Robert Coles declared an impartiality interest in item 9.1, Notice of Motion, Community Funding, Centrepoint Church Christmas Carnival 2022. The nature of the interest is I have a friendship with Pastor Joel Rossi. The extent of the interest is impartiality. Councillor David Atwell declared a financial interest in item 10.1.5, proposed radio, TV and communications installation, telecommunications tower and associated infrastructure, lot 116245 Keenan Street, Whitby. The nature of the interest is financial. The extent of the interest is fire breaks that he does fire breaks for the landowner. Councillor Atwell will leave the chamber while this item is discussed. Councillor Robert Coles declared an impartiality interest in item 10.1.7, proposed place of worship, lot 3, 155 Warrington Road, Byford. The nature of the interest is I have donated money to Byford Baptist Church. The extent of the interest is impartiality. Councillor Tricia Duggan declared an impartiality interest in item 10.1.8, proposed service station with incidental components, rural supplies store and veterinary clinic, lot 9002, formerly lot 801, 1780 Thomas Road, Oakford. The nature of the interest is close family friends with residents of lot 9006 Cargottage Road. Councillor David Atwell declared a financial interest in item 10.1.9, West Mundijong Industrial Area Discussion Paper and Infrastructure Funding. The nature of the interest is financial. The extent of the interest is part owner of land in West Mundijong. Councillor Atwell will leave the chamber while this item is discussed. Councillor David Atwell declared a financial interest in item 10.2.2, new lease 1 Everland Street, Mundijong Sale Yards. The nature of the interest is financial. The extent of the interest is he does work for the person who is getting the lease, fire breaks, etc. Councillor Atwell will leave the chamber while this item is discussed. Councillor Robert Coles declared an impartiality interest in item 10.6.1, confidential, allegation of breach of conduct, SJ 2022-1. The nature of the interest is this vexatious complaint relates to me. The extent of the interest is impartiality. Councillor Robert Coles declared an impartiality interest in item 10.6.2, confidential, allegation of breach of code of conduct, SJ 2022-2. The nature of the interest is I am the subject of this vexatious complaint. The extent of the interest is impartiality. Councillor D'Agostino has declared a proximity interest in item 10.1.8. The nature of the interest is proximity as neighbouring property owner. The extent of the interest is that he is a neighbour. Councillor D'Agostino, are you to leave the chamber while this item is discussed? Thank you. Councillor D'Agostino will leave the chamber while this item is discussed. Item number 7 is confirmation of minutes of previous council meetings. Item 7.1, ordinary council meeting held on the 17th of October 2022. Can I please have a mover for these minutes? Thank you, Councillor Strange. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Atwell. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 7.2, swearing in ceremony and special council meeting held on the 24th of October 2022. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Strange. Is there any councillor opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 7.3, special council meeting held on the 7th of November 2022. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Coles. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Atwell. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 8 is receipt of minutes, all reports and consideration of adoption of recommendations from committee meetings held since the previous council meeting. 8.1 is the Audit, Risk and Governance Committee meeting held on the 7th of November 2022. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Councillor Staunton, are you happy to second? Thank you. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 9, motions of which notice has been given. Item 9.1, notice of motion, community funding, Centrepoint Church Christmas Carnival 2022. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Councillor Coles, are you moving the councillor recommendation or the alternate officer's recommendation?
Sorry, Madam President, for the tape, councillor Coles. The motion that I moved was the alternate motion, which is the council recommendation.
Thank you, councillor Coles. Can I have a seconder for this motion, please? Thank you, councillor D'Agostino. I have a question of councillor Coles for this item. With the further funding that you've put forward to the Centrepoint Church, where are you wanting, or where is that funding coming from, and what will it take out of the budget as it currently sits?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I would defer to the Manager of Corporate Services. I know that there are 2 rounds of funding each year. So I would suggest it comes out of the second round of funding for the year, unless the Director has a better idea. I actually thought, Madam President, you're going to ask where that amount comes from, but the amount is in line with what they received in 21-22, which is 3,850.93, including GST.
Thank you, councillor Coles. Can I please direct the question to the Acting Director of Community Engagement, please?
Yes, thank you for the question. You'll note in the report that there currently is a remaining general grant budget for rounds 2 and 3 of the current financial year. The current remaining budget is $20,326.11. So yes, if this motion was to go through, it would be suggested that it would be deducted from that current allocation.
Thank you. So a follow-up question. So that would reduce the funding amount available to future applicants that apply for funding?
Yes, that's correct. There would be a budget, the budget would be less, and therefore there would be less funds available for rounds 2 and 3.
Thank you. Is there anybody opposed to this motion?
And a question, if I may, Madam President.
Yes, councillor Byers.
Councillor Coles alluded to a higher amount in previous years. Can the Director just confirm my understanding as to why that amount is lower in this funding round, as I believe it has to do with the nature of the event being slightly different? Am I understanding the report correctly? If that could be explained, please.
Director.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, look, really, as outlined in the report, the assessment panel really considered that the nature of the event was quite different to what had been delivered in previous years. And so, yeah, therefore was just a reduced amount of funding, noting that the panel still felt it was a very worthwhile event, just did not have the same demonstrated, I suppose, community need as an event on Christmas Day. There are other Christmas activities in the lead up to Christmas Day.
An additional question, if I may, Madam President. This one's a more general one because I do understand that how we manage grants has changed over the years. So it might be to the CEO or the Director, but could we get an understanding of how those grants are treated and assessed, please?
Councillor Byers, are you asking for the process that the grants go through?
Yes,
assessment?
I'm seeking to understand, because I recall how we used to do it. I just want to make sure I'm crystal clear on what the current process is, please.
Thank you. Director, Acting Director.
Yes, thank you for the question. In essence, there's sort of 3 gateposts, if you like, that a grant application will go through. The first is whether the application is eligible. And in this case, yes, it was, not-for-profit community group, etc., those types of questions. The second gatepost would be what we would refer to as sort of the funding criteria. So has the application identified a community need? How well has it scored on that basis? There's a number of factors that come into that. And then the third gatepost, if you like, would be what we'd refer to as sort of a priority. So there's a finite amount of funds available, and you may receive multiple applications that all demonstrate a really important need, but we do have a finite amount of funding. So they're really the three avenues in which an application is assessed.
Thank you very much, Acting Director. Madam President, one or two more questions. So based on what we've been provided and that explanation, my understanding then, and I'll perhaps ask the CEO where the delegation sits. So my understanding is that council then gives a delegation to officers to use this process, assess applications, and then provide grant applications on the basis of those metrics. Am I understanding that correctly? The officers hold the delegation for expending funds on this item?
Through you, Madam President, that's correct. There is a delegation from council to deal with these general grants rounds. However, that doesn't also prevent council allocating funds as well. The delegation is just an opportunity for officers to exercise that in the course of their duties.
Of course. Thank you, CEO. And in a way, you've preempted my next question. I can't recall a previous instance, at least in the past 5 years, where council has initiated a specific spend on a specific project for a specific group. Can officers recall an instance where council has effectively intervened in the grants process to provide funds outside of the accepted process?
Through the chair, I'm struggling to remember an option of that. I'm just looking at I've only been at the Shire 3 years though, but I'm looking at the acting director whether she can recall an example of that.
Sorry, I would have to take that on notice.
Sorry, if I can answer that question, Heritage Country Choir, when I put up a motion for their funding.
Thank you, Councillor Coles.
Then a follow-up to Councillor Cole's addition. I can't recall
Yes,
when
Councillor
that was. Can Councillor Coles recall?
It would have been 2000. When was COVID? 20. So it was before COVID, maybe 2019. But it's certainly, I certainly remember doing it for the Heritage Country Choir.
My final question, Madam President, it's one not to do with grants and the delegations. It's more to do with the declaration of interests. I appreciate that Councillor Coles has provided a declaration for this item. I also understand that impartiality interests don't preclude members from remaining in the room and voting on items. But I can't find anything in the guidance as to whether there's anything around proposing motions on notice such as this. So I'd perhaps take advice from the CEO as to whether there are any issues around a council that has declared an interest in proactively proposing a motion of this nature.
Mr. CEO.
Madam President, I might hand to the Director of Corporate Services. I'm not aware of any such requirement, but I'll just get that confirmed or changed by the Director.
Certainly, I'm not aware of any issues with that, but again, could refer to the Dr. Parker, Manager of Governance.
There are no prohibitions in the legislation, and nor are there any prohibitions referenced in the department's guidance material on this matter.
Thank you, Dr. Parker.
Thank you, Madam President, CEO, and all of the directors and managers for providing responses to my questions.
Thank you. I will call again. Is there any councillors opposed to this motion?
Madam President, I don't wish to speak against it, but I will vote against it.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. Councillor Coles, do you have a question?
and I was just about to debate.
Councillor Bias has indicated he doesn't wish to speak against it, but he will vote against this motion.
Madam President, whilst I might have my own opinion of why he's doing that, are we able to go to the Manager of Governance, just confirm? I find it quite peculiar that a member of council would express their opposition to a motion but not prepared to speak against it.
Mr. CEO, can we please ask the Manager of Governance?
Standing orders certainly do not preclude that. In those cases, normally the process would be for the mover to speak for the motion, and then there would be no speaker opposed, and it would be go directly to the right of reply, which is perfunctory in this case, and then be taken to a vote. But there's no requirement for any person to speak on an item, even if they are indeed the mover or the seconder opposed.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. Councillor Coles, would you like to open debate, please?
Thank you, Madam President. And I was taught when I was at school, do your homework. So I certainly have done my homework, and it's lucky that I did some checks today about my conflict and whether I was actually allowed to move this motion. So I thank the council for his question, and luckily I did my homework. I certainly wouldn't want to be in a position where I've done something wrong. Notwithstanding that, this is a motion that I put forward. Now, the reason I put this motion forward is because I sit here in this place as a councillor. My job here is to represent the community. Now, we work with the community and we work with the staff. Now, it's important to understand the staff has done a good job with this, and I thank the acting director for the work that she's done in the grant space to allow the initial amount for Centrepoint Church. Now, the reason I think it's quite clear in the officer's report why the amount was less than in past was because it's a new event, as has already been mentioned. But I guess the concern I have with that is that it was a bit of an unknown. There was an unknown in terms of how popular the event was going to be, and based on the success in the past of the Christmas Day activities, it certainly was successful. And so there was that part of the unknown. So what do we do when we're unknown? We be conservative, and being conservative is a good thing. So the concern I have is speaking to the community, there is quite clear, unequivocally, a need for an event like this. And if I can refer to the deputation or the statement that Mr. Rossi made, already within 48 hours, close registrations. So I'll start again. We launched the event last Sunday, and in 48 hours we had to close registrations as there is a huge demand for young families for the event. We currently have 583 registrations and close to another 200 on a waiting list. This has gone beyond our expectations. So it's gone beyond Centrepoint Church and Mr. Rossi's expectations, and it's fair that when they came to get the grant funding from the Shire, they were not aware or didn't expect the success of what this would be. Perhaps knowing how the Centrepoint Church work and the work they've done in the past in the community, it's not surprising that this is going to be a success. Notwithstanding that, they need the extra funds so that they can get the extra children to the event. This is a very unique event. It's an event that we don't really hear of these days because it's an event where young families, and predominantly from Byford, and also from the Shire and probably a little bit wider. But certainly for a child to rock up to celebrate Christmas, they get free face painting, they get a free hot dog, they get fairy floss, they get a free gift. This is what being a community is all about. This is what Christmas is all about. This is what us as councillors is all about. Us giving back to the community, us supporting community groups. And being pragmatic that I am, I have gone back to what they received last year. And that was the question I thought the presiding member was going to ask. So where has this extra money come from? The extra money has come from the fact that that's what they received last year for their Christmas event in Bill Hicks. This year it's at Kalimna Oval in Byford, near West Byford Primary School. There is a clear need for it. As I said, the demand certainly speaks for itself. It is what I would suggest, a insignificant amount of money. In actual fact, there's people in this room that receive more in sitting fees per month than what we're asking for a community group to put back to the community. I would certainly commend this motion.
Thank you, councillor Coles. Councillor D'Agostino, would you like to speak or reserve? Thank you, councillor D'Agostino. Is there any other councillor that would like to speak against this motion? I will actually speak against this motion. Not because I don't value the work that Centrepoint Church do, not because I don't think that the event that they have proposed and they are going to present in the community is not worthy of funding from the Shire. It has already been shown that it has been worthy of funding with the money that the officers have put forward. And as councillor Coles quoted from the statement made by Mr. Rossi this evening, that we launched the event last Sunday and in 48 hours we had to close registrations. The notice of motion that we received from councillor Coles via email, as noted on the first page of the notice, was received via email on the 11th of November. So that was actually received before this item went live in the community and registrations had started to be taken. So it's not in a response to the information that is provided in the statement this evening that this notice of motion was put forward, because it was put forward before that information was known. We have a community that is extremely diverse, that have a lot of wants and needs across the length and breadth of our Shire at this point in time. That community are asking the Shire to do work in various areas, and we simply do not have the funding to do everything that everybody wants. And as such, our officers are spreading the money where they feel that it will do the most benefit to reach as many people across the Shire as possible. This evening, we've had members of the community stand up and ask for different pieces of work to be done around our Shire. No matter how small the job, it all takes funding to get that work done. We simply don't have enough money to satisfy absolutely everybody, and the officers have done a great job in assessing the grant applications that they have received and have allocated funding across the different areas that met the criteria to receive funding from the Shire. Now, it is a catch cry we hear all too often that we don't have any money as a council, that it is communities' money, it is ratepayers' money. And it is ratepayers' money. And we are trying our absolute best to make sure that we cover as many areas across the Shire as we possibly can. And there is going to be some areas that don't get exactly what they have asked for, but where the Shire can, it does provide what we can at that time. So, given the information that we have before us this evening, and I do congratulate Mr. Rossi on the time and effort that his volunteers are putting into this event, I cannot support extra funding going to this event at this time, given the fact of knowing how much our community are asking to have done, and some of it is necessities that they are asking to have done around road intersections, around road infrastructure, and every little single piece of funding adds up. So I am this evening not able to support the motion on notice that Councillor Coles has put forward. Thank you.
Madam President, just a question. When does round 2 close?
Acting Director, are you able to provide a response to Councillor Strange?
Yes, round 2 has recently closed and the assessment process is underway.
Just a follow-up question then, did Centrepoint submit anything for round 2?
Acting Director?
I haven't seen all of the applications, so I couldn't say, but I would suggest not, given that it would be unlikely they'd know the outcome of that prior to their event if you're talking about an application for this same activity.
So you're saying even though it closed recently, it wouldn't be advised until after the event?
No, sorry. What I'm saying is we would not have advised that a community group put in an application for a Christmas event in the round 2, given that it can take some time to get the responses back to applicants.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Is there any councillors that wish to speak for the motion?
Madam President, I would like to speak for the motion.
Councillor Straughtons?
Thank you, Madam President. I have often raised the topic with community services to imagine the cost of getting attendees. So that would be divided by the amount of people, the cost of the event, and divided by the amount of people that attend. Knowing full well that often the sum doesn't come up as good as it would for this event, which is under $6 per person if they get the full funding that's proposed in this notice of motion. So I would suggest that as the council going forward, if it could guarantee the cost of getting attendees would be under $6 per person, that the council would take that option any day. If we want to get more value from this, because there are competing needs, then there's also a possibility to think a little bit innovatively about this. And with so many people attending, it's a great opportunity to promote other events. People get a good feeling, they enjoy going to this event, and they might feel a bit despondent that they have to wait another year till the next event. However, if the Shire is promoting the next events, handing out pamphlets of upcoming events, then the Shire can regain back some value from the monetary value that we spend. So there's many ways to achieve value, and I think this event is definitely achieving value. If we are concerned that awarding them more money is not providing more value, then why not be there to hand out pamphlets to the community of the upcoming events to gain more value back? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Straughtons. Is there any other councillors that would wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Coles?
Thanks, Madam President. I might just start with the comments just being made, and certainly my understanding is the Shire, irrespective of what happens tonight, the money that's already been awarded to Centrepoint Church has enabled the Shire logo being put on some material. So that certainly is in line with Councillor Strawton's comments. And it's a really interesting comment that is made about numbers. And we look at what page is this? The second page of my notice of motion, where you have a look at the funding. And one thing I've noticed here is Sports Aircraft Builders Club. They got 100% of. Beanyap Primary School, what they asked for, they got 100% of. Keysbrook Community Group, what they asked for, they got 100% of. Centrepoint Church is obviously what we're talking about tonight. Byford Glades Community Garden, they got, I'm not very, my maths aren't that good, but I would say conservatively 80% of what they've asked for, they got. And then Hugh Tractor Machinery got just over 60%, roughly, of what they asked for. Then we've got Centrepoint Church. They asked for $5,000 and they received $1,700. So I think that in itself speaks for itself. I guess my concerns are, and notwithstanding the fact there's members of the public here and it's also being recorded, we've got to be very, very careful and what we say in debate and what can be twisted and what can be used against people. Now, there is a thing called a budget, and different parts of budgets has different parts for funding and the like. What I'm trying to say is for roadworks, for maintenance to be done, that comes out of a different part of the budget. We're talking tonight about a part of the budget which is community grants, community funding, where we've heard from the acting director there's 3 rounds of that. So what I would say on the record is to say that if we gave Centrepoint Church an extra $1,800, that would stop verges from getting mowed or the intersection of Cargodditch Road getting weeds pulled out is a irresponsible comment. So let's just make that certain and upfront. That this money is coming out of a different part of the budget to roads and to infrastructure. That needs to be cleared. As explained before, when one of the other councillors asked a question, the extra 1959, where could that come from? And I put out an option for it to come from the later rounds in the year. 1959, so potentially that could be $800 from one proponent or one applicant and another $859 from another applicant. So it is achievable. It's not going to come out of roads. It's not going to come out of maintenance for parks. And certainly it would be irresponsible of me to suggest those funds would come out of the infrastructure that we need after speaking to the community for so long over the last couple of months when before my re-election. Part of that is when you don't sit here, you realise the opportunity you have as a councillor. And it's always a term of flattery when you're quoted in this place. So I do acknowledge the fact I was quoted about we don't have any money and the money that we have is ratepayers' money. That's very true. But we also have the ability in this place to do some good. We have the ability to listen to the community and to redirect funds. Notwithstanding delegation, I think the CEO made a very clear delineation about delegation, how we as elected representatives have the ability to spend money in certain ways. We have the ability to bring matters to council, as I do with the Heritage Country Choir. Again, going back to the comment I made before about dispersions and accusations, this certainly isn't something new. This is something that I've done before. So let's look at the community. Let's understand that there is a real need for this. There are people in the community that are doing it tough. There are people in the community who would love to celebrate Christmas, celebrate what Christmas is all about, to come together, to celebrate, to have a hot dog, to get their face painted, to get a gift, and to actually enjoy life and reflect upon what a year it's been. As I said, the money is coming out of a different part of the budget. We do have grants that pay for this. The last point I would make is think about your role as a councillor. Think about the opportunity you have to make a difference in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. All those for the motion? All those against? Motion is carried 7-2.
And I would ask the votes recorded, please, Madam President.
Minute Secretary, can we please have the votes recorded? Item 9.2, notice of motion, notice of motion, electoral reform advocacy. Can I please have a mover for this motion?
Might I request a alternate motion 9.2 as I distributed earlier today.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. Can I please have a seconder for the alternate motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Is there anybody opposed to this motion?
Question, if I may, Madam President.
Councillor Bias?
To, I guess the CEO or maybe even Councillor Mack, my understanding of the process clearly isn't to the same level as those who have been through it this year. But I'm just trying to understand some of the references in this motion. So, for example, it talks about, trying to find the section. It mentions in point 1, point 2, and point 1 and 2 concerning this appropriate authority. Is that clearly defined under current legislation, or is the intent to have it clearly defined?
Mr. Martin?
Madam President, I think it's Councillor Mack's motion. I think, he should get a chance to answer it first, and then if the councillors want, officers can provide some further detail.
Councillor Mack?
Thank you, Councillor Bias, for the question. Yeah, it's the Act itself does define some authority to investigate, but as was seen through the Court of Disputed Returns, a lacuna in the legislation that was argued in the courts, whereby there were certain parts of the Act where separate authorities who I would deem as appropriate authorities were actually arguing it wasn't there appropriate for them to investigate.
Madam President, the Manager of Governance might want to add anything more to that or clarify it from the officer's point of view about that. No?
So following on from that, Madam President, and I do apologise to the councillor because I clearly don't have the same level of understanding that he does, having gone through this. So it mentions around investigations. So would this be changing legislation to allow that more clearly defined authority to conduct investigations? Is that the intent concerning around point 2, which is around investigations?
Councillor Mack?
Again, thank you for the question. I guess that's why the alternate motion came around, taking on board what the officers had recommended, that a working group would be the appropriate way forward here to actually discuss what is and isn't appropriate, and who the appropriate authorities are. And whilst it can be argued that it is defined in the Act currently, there is actually nothing around the legislation itself that actually compels the level of investigation. So you're simply asking a question here might be sufficient to actually satisfying the need to actually do an investigation rather than actually properly conducting an appropriate investigation.
One supplementary question, I promise. It's concerning the time frame. I guess the impetus for this, is there a time frame the council is trying to achieve? And if so, what is it? Because I'm struggling to understand why, for example, this hasn't come to council as a PCF item to discuss, rather than as a notice of motion that was within the timeframes requested, but not in time for us to have a Q&A for it, for example. So I'm just curious as to whether we're trying to achieve some sort of time frame, or whether it would be beneficial for council to be able to actually discuss what's being proposed to the minister.
Councillor Mack?
Yeah, so my reason for wanting to put the motion forward as soon as possible, there we are currently under legislative review within the state government. And there is, I guess, a time frame there to making sure that any of these legislative changes are going to take time to workshop, and to have that done in a timely manner to actually get these put through before any of these legislative changes are made. I certainly don't want to be responsible for holding that up, and believe a timely matter is appropriate.
Then my questions to the CEO. What input are we currently having into the minister's reforms, and what are the timeframes for those inputs?
Through the chair, thanks for the question. I guess the minister's made it's clear that the priority is around the electoral election of the Shire president, properly elected, and some changes that would come into place for that next year. I think that this would be a much more longer term arrangement that might be needed to be considered. And we're not having any further involvement other than what the council has seen. I think there's been some input staff have had to some regulations and type thing, but no more involvement than what council has seen in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councillor Byers. Councillor Mack, I also have a question. As listed in number 1 and number 2, you have used the wording appropriate in both passages. In the first one, that electoral officers in offences in local government elections to ensure that the authority to undertake investigations of electoral offences and commence prosecutions related to electoral offences are clearly assigned and appropriate. And in number 2 is complaints which call into question the validity of an election and the process in which those complaints are investigated, ensuring an appropriate authority completes an investigation prior to the cut-off for a complaint to be made to the Court of Disputed Returns. What does appropriate mean? Obviously, if this is supported by council, we can write a letter to the minister, we can make the request, but what is the expectation with the word appropriate, given that what one person sees as appropriate, another person will not see as appropriate? And forgive me, but I make the assumption that if there is no change after this is done, that you won't find that to be appropriate, even if it is looked at by people in government to see whether what is in place works at present or doesn't work at present. So I just find it a little bit rubbery with the word appropriate, given that we don't know what appropriate is. Yep.
Can I just clarify that then what the question was just around what I determine appropriate to be?
Well, it's what is appropriate.
I guess,
given
Madam
the way
President,
this is
maybe
written.
if I can indulge by answering the question by saying what isn't appropriate, and having spent the last 14 months as a ratepayer in the Court of Disputed Returns, having the burden of costs over myself and my family of the courts, as we can see by the magistrate's decision, the outcome and the verdict came on the back of an investigation that I undertook myself as an individual and private citizen. I do not believe it appropriate to have that burden on an individual to have to do that investigation as it currently stands under the legislation. we have had throughout, not just this shire, but many shires, complaints made around electoral offences. And it is a standard reply that every person has the opportunity to apply to the Court of Disputed Returns with the loading that you are responsible for the costs, or you could be liable for the costs of that court case if you cannot prove in your investigation enough evidence there could have been an alternate outcome. Not the preservation of fraud, not anything to do with any electoral offences. The burden is on any individual who puts in a complaint to have the burden of proof on them to prove there could have been an ulterior outcome. And I do not think it is appropriate that we leave it to a person without any authority to investigate to have the only person to have the ability to actually go to the courts. And that is what we saw under this recent court case in the first half hour of debate, when the two leading parties in the investigation argued it was not their responsibility to investigate. Thank you.
So you still have not answered my question with the two words in number 1 and 2, where you have appropriate written. The authorities where this go to could very well deem what is already in place is appropriate. So using the word appropriate in what you have put forward in your alternate motion of notice doesn't put forward what the expectation of the outcome is for your motion of notice.
Thank you, Madam President. So that is why I think it was the alternate motion put through was taking on board what the officers had recommended about workshopping this, about getting the right people together to hear from the experiences of what has happened, and for people to actually listen to how the process worked for a working group to determine what is appropriate. It's not for me to determine what is appropriate. I have my opinions and they're very strong on the topic, but it is not for me to determine. And that is why a working group was a fantastic idea that was put forward, and one that could actually determine what is more appropriate and where that burden should lie.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. What is your expectation of a working group if the minister sees fit to put a working group in place?
My expectation would be a comprehensive review of the process of complaints through the Court of Disputed Returns and a review into the integrity of the electoral process as a whole.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10 is Chief Executive Officer reports. 10.1 is Development Services reports. 10.1.1 is Retrospective Development Application for Works, Fill Lot 10, Gossage Road, Albury. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Coles. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Strange. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Thank you, Councillor Atwell. Councillor Coles, would you please open debate?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Thank you for the opportunity to speak for this motion. The motion I'm putting up is the officer's recommendation. So this is retrospective, and I know that word does cause some angst in the community and also with around the table here, and it certainly does cause me some angst as well. It's almost the case of going out and getting it done and then seeking approval after the event, or sort of go and what's the saying? It's better to beg for permission than ask. Sorry, beg for forgiveness and ask for permission. Was what I was trying to say. But notwithstanding that, Shire officers have gone out. Shire officers have looked and done their due diligence, and quite clearly, and I refer my fellow councillors to page 12 of the agenda, where the concerns have been itemised, and then directly next to those concerns, the officer comments which allay those concerns. So they have got a certificate of the fill and evidence of the commercial source. It's discussed further in the nature of the fill section of the report. The works acknowledged to have taken place, being retrospective in nature, officers consider no further impact would occur from works by way of traffic or dust, and officers note that both properties have access from Boomerang Road and then through an access road created in 1925, which was part of the historic subdivision approval. Though the concern of the objector is damage to the driveway, which is located within the property, there is a legal right-of-way agreement in place between these neighbours and Water Corporation. Permits access to the subject site over the objector's land. The legal agreement provides requirements for management and works within the right-of-way area. And I'm sure that council have already read that anyway. But in any event, what I'm trying to say is it is retrospective. It is of concern that it is retrospective, but I'm confident in moving the officer's recommendation that the remediation works have been done. It has been inspected, and there are no more concerns as per the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Coles. Councillor Strange, would you like to speak or reserve?
Thanks, Madam President. I just concur with Councillor Coles's comments. The officers have outlined clear responses to the concerns raised, and they're satisfied that the proposal is acceptable, subject to the well-documented conditions outlined on page 20. And I think that is why I would commend it to fellow councillors.
Thank you, councillor Strange. Councillor Atwell.
Yes, Madam President, my concerns, and I won't go into a great deal of rhetoric because I don't do that sort of thing anyway. But my concerns are mainly to do with the fact that it is retrospective. If we keep allowing people to do retrospective things, especially with this in the area where this is located, which is extremely wet. As you probably all well know, that area is extremely wet and subject to inundation from water. Now, letting people just put roads, whatever, willy-nilly all over the place and then approving them, I don't think is the appropriate way to go. Also, I read with interest on the retrospective development. The application seeks to retrospective approval for the placement of the purpose of ensuring fire breaks are trafficable all year round and construction of internal access tracks due to seasonal inundation. Well, I might be not very bright, but I do know succinctly that you do not need a fire break all year round. And also, this person had every opportunity when they purchased this property, as you all know, that you do your own due diligence. If you purchase a property and it is too wet, that is your bad luck, really. And to continue to keep putting these things on because some people don't do their due diligence is not appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Atwell. Any other councillors that would like to speak for the motion? Councillor Coles, would you like to close, please?
Yeah, thanks, Madam President. I'll just correct something that Councillor Atwell said. You are actually an intelligent councillor, and the fact that you keep on opposing these retrospective applications, Councillor Atwell, shows that you are a smart councillor and you're here for the right reasons. I agree with you. The retrospective approvals aren't great. And I think I've said this before, and you can all have a laugh. But we need to draw a line in the sand, pardon the pun, with retrospective approvals. But that line in the sand has to be drawn. In this instance, they have done everything that's required of them. Officers have gone out, they have inspected it, and they're happy with what the proponents have done. So I agree wholeheartedly that we need to look at retrospective approvals, and I think that there was something being done in the background that we're going to talk about as a council at PCFs about how we can do a better process for retrospective approvals. And I do note, albeit I haven't been here for a couple of months, but I do remember at the start of the year there was a marked reduction in retrospective approvals. So I think the officers need to be commended for that. And perhaps we as a council can get together to PCF and look at some better ways to look at retrospective approvals. But notwithstanding all that, I amend or commend this motion.
Thank you, councillor Coles. All those in favour of this motion? All those against? Motion is carried 8-1. Item 10.1.2, Metropolitan or Metro Outer Development Assessment Panel deferral, proposed use not listed, brewery and restaurant and associated works, lot 201-1248 Carnup Road, Serpentine. Before we continue, can I please remind the public gallery to please be quiet while the meeting is in progress? It does make it hard to concentrate when we can hear the conversations in the background.
Madam President, I've got a quick question, if I could, regards to this agenda item. Thank you. We had a good deputation tonight where some quantitative information was shared about how they are willing to restructure car parks, the amount of beer brewed and things like that. Would it be appropriate to note, do we think, I guess a question to yourself, Madam President, or the CEO, to note those, how would you call them, adjustments?
Councillor Strawtons, that information will go out to the public for community consultation.
So it is official.
So it doesn't need to be noted here. The motion that we have before us tonight is purely for the deferral of this item so that it can continue through the planning process at JDAP level.
Thank you, Madam President. Good clarification.
Can I please have a mover for the motion that we have before us this evening, please? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Councillor Strawtons, are you happy to second? Thank you. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.1.3, Southwestern Highway Draft Access Strategy for south of Abernethy Road and west of the highway. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Strange. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.1.4, proposed transport depot at lot 1012 Tunney Road, Oldbury. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Coles. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Strawtons. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Yes.
Just at the director, with the list of chemicals we've got here, if they were to add anything to that, they would have to notify us prior to get approval for that. Would that be correct?
Thank you for the question through you, Madam President. Yes, that is correct.
Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.1.5, proposed radio, TV and communications installation, telecommunications tower and associated infrastructure, lot 116 245 Kernan Street, Whitby. I have an alternate motion that has been circulated to councillors for this item.
Madam President, can I ask some questions on your motion, or do I need to wait for a second?
Wait for a seconder, please. The alternate motion that I have put forward deletes the officer's recommendation, part B, and in its place The development is to be set back a distance of 170 metres from Kernan Street within the cleared southwest corner on the subject land. In being relocated, the development is to maintain a minimum 5 metre setback from the western property boundary and 10 metre setback from the southern property boundary. Can I have a seconder for this alternate motion, please? Thank you, Councillor D'Agostino. Councillor D'Agostino, you have questions?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. So I'm just not aware of the area, but should there not, I just kind of understand your rationale, not still having a landscape plan for the neighbours. Are you comfortable that they won't be impacted?
Having been out and actually looked at the site, if council supports the relocation to 170 metres south from Kernan Street, it won't be visible. The base will not be visible from the road as it would be in the current officer's recommendation. And secondly, this area has been earmarked for urban development. So somewhere into the future, these larger lifestyle blocks will most likely be subdivided and redeveloped as urban land. And given that fact, the amended motion location is actually quite a lot better than having it forward on the block.
Thank you. And then a supplementary question, which probably goes to the director. We've got the LPP 4.6 about telecommunications infrastructure, and there's a specific reference in there about carriers must co-locate on existing towers and monopoles and basically offer to the other carriers up the ability to access that. And the applicant will be required to demonstrate the proposal So basically there is a compulsion on carriers, and we're all about trying to minimise the number of these structures because they are not the most aesthetically appealing. So I'm just wondering if I could ask the director, could we, and subject to your approval, but would it not normally be a condition in this approval that this applicant must comply with policy 4.6 and specifically allow up to 3 other carriers to co-locate as required there?
Director?
Thank you for the question. The actual application does state that it will provide co-location opportunities. So we haven't seen the need to condition that because they've expressly indicated they would provide that opportunity.
Thanks. And sorry, but just to clarify very clearly, legally, if, for example, Optus were then to come to this, I think it's going to be leased by Telstra, there would be a compulsion on them to allow access to Optus as a result of that being in the DA. Is that your understanding?
Yes, thank you for the question through the chair. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Is there anybody opposed to this motion?
Sorry, Madam President, I'm not opposed. I'll just have a couple of questions if I may.
Councillor Coles?
Thanks, Madam President. Just in relation, probably a naive question, but I'm going to ask it. 170 metres setback, does that affect the coverage in any way?
I'll defer to the Director of Development Services.
Thank you. I just missed the word, the affect the current
coverage.
Oh, coverage. From my understanding, no, there wouldn't be any impact on addressing, I guess, that impacted area of Whitby and North Mundijong that suffers from those coverage sort of problems at this time.
Sorry, if I can. Sorry, Madam President, if I can, just, is that unequivocal, Director, or you're 80% sure, 90% sure?
The only way I'd be 100% sure would be to have the applicant confirm it. So
has that been done?
No, it hasn't.
Okay. My second question is that diagram that's been circulated in alternate motion. What's the date of that aerial image?
Thank you for the question. That's the latest near map, so just bear with me and I'll be able to find the date. One moment.
And just the reason is looking at Street View on my phone, it looks different to that, but I don't know what's more accurate.
All right. So that image I captured from the November 14, the November 14 near map image of Mundijong.
Thank you, Director. Another question if I can through the chair. Was any photographs taken from the front of the street looking towards where the tower would be at the 170 metre setback?
Director?
Thank you for the question. No, there hasn't been any attempt to photograph that other than just noting the tall trees that would exist between it and the street. But there's been no photo montage to try to indicate what it may look like at a greater setback.
And last question, if I can, through the chair. When you talk about the applicant and the coverage by moving the tower by 170 metres, are you talking about Telstra, or are you talking about Mr. and Mrs. I've lost my page. Mr. and Mrs. Ritchie.
Thank you for the question. So we're talking about Vision Stream, which is the corporation of Telstra that deal with their mobile infrastructure.
This relates to the setback. Have Mr. and Mrs. Ritchie been consulted about setback?
My understanding is that they have spoken with neighbours and they are not overly concerned as long as the tower is approved and goes in to provide better coverage than what the North Mundijong Whitby area currently has.
And I'm sure that could be the case, but have we got that unequivocally that they are happy for it to be moved?
We don't have it in writing, no.
Okay, thank you. I'm opposed to the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. In opening debate, this is something that our North Mundijong, South Cardup and Whitby residents have been asking for an extremely long time. We do have significant black spots in mobile coverage, which then follows through to internet coverage in those areas. Having been out and looked at the site and looked at the proposed location and knowing what this area is zoned for and what will happen into the future, it is my view that better location has been put forward in the alternate motion. The coverage maps that have been put forward as part of the report that officers have provided to council shouldn't be affected with the move of 170 metres. It is quite a tall tower, and the relocation is to simply be able to give better street amenity to the people that live in the vicinity of where this tower is going to be located, so that it doesn't impede on the streetscape of this area. Thank you. Councillor D'Agostino, would you like to speak or reserve?
I'll reserve. Thanks, Madam President.
Thank you. Councillor Coles.
Yeah, thanks, Madam President. I certainly agree with the comments that black spot and we need better mobile phone reception and coverage in the area, certainly in all parts of the Shire, not just in the South Wards. I certainly concur with you. I would foreshadow the officer's recommendation And the reason I do that is it's all about consulting with the community and seeing what the community wants. Part of the community in this instance is Mr. and Mrs. Ritchie. I don't take shouldn't be or my understanding as gospel. It needs to be on beyond, using a legal term, beyond reasonable doubt. I would hate for us to approve this and then Mr. and Mrs. Ritchie not to be happy, or probably more of a concern is that 170 metres actually changes the coverage. Now, I'm no expert in radiographic waves or telecommunication waves, but certainly if it's like a circle, if the middle of the circle is moved 170 metres, and I would imagine that coverage is then moved by 170 metres. Maybe, maybe not, but certainly I'm not going to make a decision or support a motion where we're talking about should be and my understanding. So I don't support the alternate motion, and I foreshadow the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, councillor Coles. Is there anybody else that would like to speak for the motion? I'm happy to take this motion straight to the vote. All those in favour of the alternate motion? All those against? Motion is carried 6-2. Can we please ask Councillor Atwell to return to the chamber?
And Madam President, we will need a difference for the reason for the officer's recommendation, please.
SPP 5.2 states that telecommunication infrastructure should be sited and designed to minimise visual impact. She can actually cut and paste it out of the report on page 58 in the second last paragraph.
First sentence about the policy framework.
So if we start at SPP 5.2 and to the end of that paragraph.
And Madam President, if we could record the votes, that would be good, please.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. Minute Secretary, can we please record the votes as well? Councillor Atwell, the alternate motion put forward for this item has been carried 6-2. That alternate motion sees the deletion of Part B in the officer's recommendation and has that replaced with the development is to be set back a distance of 170 metres from Kiernan Street within the cleared southwest corner on the subject land. In being relocated, the development is to maintain a minimum 5 metre setback from the western property boundary and a 10 metre setback from the southern property boundary.
Thank you, Madam President.
Item 10.1.6, proposed amendment to conditions of approved extractive industry, lot 4, King Road, Albury. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Coles. Can I please have a seconder for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.1.7, proposed place of public worship, lot 3, 155 Warrington Road, Byford. Can I please have a mover for this item? I'm happy to move. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.1.8, proposed service station with incidental components, Rural Supply Store and Veterinary Clinic, Lot 9002, formerly Lot 801, 1780 Thomas Road, Oakford. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, councillor Coles. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, councillor Duggan. Is there anybody opposed to this motion?
Not opposed, Madam President, but I do have a question.
Yes, councillor Bias.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm just trying to find it in the report, but I'm struggling. Through to the director, I recall a section of the report indicated that there was some advice from Main Road still outstanding, or there was some body of information from another body that we were still waiting on. Is that accurate? Is there still some party due to have input into this? And if so, would it come to us, or would it just go straight through? Thank you, Madam President.
Director?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Thank you for the question, Councillor Bias. Essentially the position of the WAPC was expressed as being contingent upon the position of Main Roads WA. Having received the position of Main Roads WA, which supports the proposal, the WAPC haven't provided any further clarification to say they're now happy. They basically deferred that point to that agency.
Excellent. Thank you, Director. That was exactly the spot that I was remembering. So thank you, Director, and thank you, Madam President.
Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Can we please ask councillor D'Agostino to return? Councillor D'Agostino, the officer's recommendation for item 10.1.8 has been carried unanimously by council. Item 10.1.9, West Mundijong Industrial Area Discussion Paper and Infrastructure Funding. Can I please have a mover?
Madam President, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with a slight amendment. The amendment being that Council 1 endorses the discussion paper and accompanying questions as provided in attachment 1, subject to the following changes. A, modifying part 5 of the discussion paper to list a further risk as follows. There is also a potential risk that the project may not proceed based on competition in the industrial land market that is growing in the southeast corridor of Perth. This could result in pressure being placed on the Shire to explore various incentives or even disincentives to drive development, such as differential rating. It would be important to consider how best to manage such levers in a way which creates flexibility, but also certainty for the project in attracting investment. Then point B, inserting a new question 5A of the discussion paper as follows. In order to promote development taking place, would you consider differential rating methodologies to be an appropriate lever in which the Shire could, utilise? For example, providing an incentive for land to be developed, improved, versus land sitting undeveloped, unimproved. Yes, no, please provide reasons for your answer. The rest is as per the officer recommendation.
And Madam President, I'd also like to propose some amendments to this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Stroughton, are you happy to second so that you can make amendments?
Yes, Madam President, I'm happy to second.
Thank you.
Madam President, point of order. My understanding of standing orders is that a mover and a seconder can't propose amendments to a motion. So this would need to be via the conduit of consent of the mover and seconder, not as opposed to amendments as a separate consideration.
Thank you, councillor Bias.
Madam President, there's nothing stopping councillor Stratton's as the seconder to the motion to move an amendment to the motion. There's also nothing stopping councillor Strange as the mover, councillor Stratton's as the seconder to make minor amendments to the motion. However, if there were substantial amendments, an amendment would be a better mechanism by doing that. But councillor Stratton's automatic seconding of the motion is the seconding of councillor Strange's motion, not necessarily the items he wants automatically included in that motion. Does that make sense?
Madam President, I'd be happier with it being dealt with as an amendment.
Councillor Strange.
So, Madam President, councillor Stratton's has seconded the motion. So we've got a live motion, moved councillor Strange, seconded councillor Stratton's. Councillor Stratton's wants to move an amendment to the motion. He has the opportunity to do that. Now we've got a live motion, and he could move an amendment. If he gets a second to those amendments, the council will debate and consider the amendments. That, depending on where that goes, that would be either the standard motion or lost.
Thank you. Councillor Strawtons, would you like to put up your amendment, please?
Thank you, Madam President. I guess in addition to councillor Strange's amendments, my amendments would start as I've sent through earlier. The point A would actually start at point C, if I recall it correctly. And then my point B can completely remove, as I see it as a duplicate. But so starting my point C would be modifying part 6 of the discussion paper to list a further partnering stakeholder of environmentally friendly suppliers. So it's not in the questions. This is in point 6 of the discussion paper. And it would be a 4th point added to point 6 of the discussion paper, to the 3 points that are already there.
Councillor, you're proposing that this is a point C, is that right, as the minute secretary's got there?
Yes.
1.C?
Yes, that's correct. So yes, we can leave it there.
As the minute secretary's got on the screen, you're proposing that your amendment is to add a point C?
Yeah, that's correct.
Which reads like that? Yep.
You've deleted my point B, I guess. I can see. Yeah. Yeah, you can remove that, what you just marked as B. Just delete that completely. Because it's a repeat. Yep, that's it. And then the following amendments simply relate to the questions that would be put to the public, and it gives them an additional option to answer under each of the questions as clearly indicated as you have on the screen. Question 1, an additional potential answer would be yes if my preferred options following are adopted.
Then there's no need for point 2, is there really? If we just scroll down, please, Minute Secretary. There's no need for point 2 because point 2 is already moved. That's correct? Is that your understanding?
That'd be correct.
Yep.
So, and the following questions, do I need to read them, or you see them on the screen? For the purpose of those listening, fair enough. So question 2, an additional option for the public to reply would be leading the inclusion of sustainable energy supply towards net zero carbon emission. Question 3, an additional reply for the public would be the Shire will be able to reduce rate burden on ratepayers via the gaining of energy supply income. Question 4, an additional option to reply for the public would be the Shire will contribute to global warming unless the Shire works towards a net zero emission industrial area. Question 6, the addition would be engage with innovative, sustainable, I'll pronounce that correctly, engage with innovative, sustainable energy supply organisations to supply and manage towards net zero emission and income for the Shire. Lastly, question 7, information on how net zero emissions are being achieved.
Thank you, councillor Strawton. Do I have a seconder for the amendment put forward by councillor Strawton?
Madam President, could I just check that should that, the bit that heads into the questions there, should that not be a D? Because it's sort of, it's separate to C?
It does go into a separate area.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the part of the discussion paper, it's part of the questions, which technically may well form part of the 5-page handout we've got for the discussion paper.
Councillor Strawton, would you like to add a small narrative before the questions that you are adding, or before the supplement that you are adding to the questions, so that it is understood what they are?
Madam President, I absolutely understand these questions sitting on their own. They are very difficult to understand. So the narrative I would offer would be the exact questions that are proposed by the officers. Question 1 being, what areas should be considered as being the strategic West Mundijong industrial area? Does the current extent need further engagement? And as I've proposed, I would think that asking people, does the industrial area need to be enlarged? I think people would have conditions for it to be enlarged. So that's why I've added the extra question, yes, if my preferred options following are adopted.
Councillor Strawton, would it help people who read the minutes to understand the point of your amendment if above question 1 it had something like add the following to the questions as listed below?
I get your point, Madam President. Yes, that's a very good set of words you've chosen. Add the following answer options to the questions as proposed and the officer's recommendation.
Yes.
Yes.
If we move that down, right after the word suppliers, before the questions are in there. Thank you. Is that what you're thinking, Councillor Scott?
And the following possible answers below to the questions proposed by in the officer's recommendation.
Are you happy with the wording on the screen now as you'll know? Yes.
Yes, I'm happy with that.
Thank you, councillor Strawton. Can I please have a seconder for the amendment put forward by councillor Strawtons? Thank you, councillor Duggan. Is there anybody opposed to this amendment?
Question, Madam President. Just around that section around the officer's recommendation, because technically it's not the officer's recommendation, it's an alternate councillor motion. So I just want to make sure that we've put an appropriate instruction in there. I get that it's self-evident, but it's not the officer's recommendation that we're dealing with.
Yes. In my thinking, if I could, through the chair, maybe the words the original officer's recommendation, because it really is the officer's recommendation.
Excellent. Thank you, councillor.
Thank you, councillor Bias. Is there anybody opposed to this amendment?
Madam President, I would just ask again whether that requires a D in front of it, in front of add the following possible answers, because it's an amendment.
Mr. Martin?
Madam President, I think officers get the intention of what the council is proposing, and I think the point C is that, and I think they're separate in the discussion paper, the answer to the question. So I think we get the idea. Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Martin, should it have a 2 in front of it then?
It's up to the council if you don't want it to.
I very much appreciate everyone's input. I would think a 2 would be very suitable in front of the word add. Thank you.
I'll ask again, is there anybody opposed to this amendment? Councillor D'Agostino, you're opposed?
I'm sorry, not the amendment, no, so I'm waiting for the resolution to come back.
No, we're still dealing with the amendment. If there is nobody opposed to the amendment is carried unanimously. So the amendment now becomes part of the substantive motion that we have before us. Eight zero, thank you. Now we'll return to the substantive motion. We have a mover in councillor Strange and a seconder in councillor Strawtons. Is there anybody opposed to this substantive motion we now have before us? Councillor D'Agostino? Councillor Strange, would you like to open debate, please?
Thank you, Madam President. In terms of development outcomes critical to ensure the ongoing financial sustainability of our Shire and the ability of us to lessen the rating burden on our mortgage-stressed residential population, West Mundajong is the single most important development for this council to actively facilitate. Over 13,500 direct local jobs, 13,500 direct jobs, industrial rates income of some $4.5 million annually. We as a council need to do everything we can to bring these benefits forward as much as possible. The impact and importance of providing a catalyst for development here cannot be underestimated. The area has been earmarked as the Shire's premier industrial area since 2008, and it's been zoned for this purpose since 2018. The amendment that I have added to the officer's recommendation seeks merely to add consideration of additional levers that council may wish to exercise in the future to further incentivise developers to bring on early development. And I find it hard to entertain a basis at this point in time for any objection to the motion currently before us. This is critical action if we are to move forward and get development on the ground. And with that in mind, I'm keen to hear opposing views from Councillor D'Agostino.
Thank you, Councillor Strange. Councillor Strawtons, would you like to speak or reserve?
I'd like to speak. Thank you, Madam President. I have obviously put some very environmentally considerate additional answers to the questions that are going to be put to the public. And my reason for that is because these questions are about the Mundijong Industrial Park and its future. And many would say that there's no sustainable future for the industrial park unless it is a net carbon neutral future. We also need to make this industrial park attractive and competitive and differentiated. So there's comparative advantages and competitive advantages that can come from it being a net zero emitting industrial park. There are many tenants that do not want to be in buildings unless they are environmentally friendly, they are energy efficient, and they need to be in areas that have energy efficiency so as to help them capture more market share. So that would help this industrial park differentiate from other industrial parks. As we are in a rural shire, having an industrial area that is pursuing net carbon zero emission, then that is in keeping with our rural area and the fact that we are part of a food bowl. We also are a member of Switch Your Thinking, which I'm a member of, representing the council, and they have communicated back to myself that they would like to be involved in the early stages, consulting the development of this industrial park to be energy efficient. So that is a great asset for us. And also in the Peel region, we have the Peel Business Park, for its own reasons, for its own isolation, has pursued supplying its own energy. Things have moved on since then too, and so it's not exclusive to the Peel Industrial Park that we can also use hydrogen or wind or geothermal to provide energy to this industrial park. We could well find that we invite best practices, competitive exporters, developers of such environmentally friendly technology, if we embrace what and where businesses are heading towards rather fast. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Strawtons. Councillor D'Agostino.
Thanks, Madam President. And I'd like to foreshadow that if this agenda item is defeated, I'd propose an alternative motion that it be deferred to a future PCF and then following that a future council meeting. I've got a couple of concerns with this agenda item, and I think the mixing of two very different concepts here is flawed. On the one hand, we're talking about an important strategic paper. The other hand, we're talking about some significant expenditure of ratepayers' money. So I think that's a fundamental problem with this. And in relation to the proposed roadworks, it's $150,000 of ratepayers' money for what's accepted as a temporary interim solution. Now, I think we've heard somewhere temporary might mean up to 10 years, who knows? But I'm unclear why we now need to undertake these major works, which were not identified in our very recent budget. And I think it's really a piecemeal solution for an interim basis. And the catalyst is obviously the proposed development by the new landowner who we've heard from tonight. And I think the issue there is that the officers sort of talk of a capital contribution by the landowner, and there is an option 2 in the resolution about the landowner contributing, you know, they've put 45,000, but query what the number is. And I believe at a minimum, if this was to proceed, there should be a contribution by the developer, as clearly the officers have identified. I think the wording they've used is that council may consider that the subdivider as a direct beneficiary may be required to make a financial contribution to such work. So that's one of many key issues. I think I'm very unclear as to the veracity of the cost estimates. It does seem a little rushed. The wording used in here is that the costs are sorry, I can't read my own writing, but indicative. Now, we've seen so many blowout on costs. Those sort of wordings are just big red flags for me. You know, I think the fundamental issue here is we need to do some more work and on the road issue in terms of clarifying the costing, and also the issue of having RAV4 big trucks. Like, restricted access vehicles have a significant impact. There are significant restrictions on restricted access vehicles coming into our area into the region for obvious reasons. You know, we need to do more work on the implications of allowing the RAV4 type vehicles in. In relation to the discussion paper, I understand this is driven by the CEO's KPIs, and I understand that's important, but we shouldn't be putting those drivers about the CEO's KPIs ahead of what's a very important issue. And the key issue here is to get this project right for the ratepayers. As Council Australia said, there will be some significant economic impact. The question is, what is the right way for the Shire to get involved in that? I haven't seen a business case. I haven't seen the analysis. I haven't seen any work done on the potential costs to the Shire, on the potential costs to ratepayers. And I think there's still more work to be done on that aspect before we issue the discussion paper. And the other key issue here is that there are some significant strategic issues overlaying West Mundijong, and that's obviously Westport. Now, we all know that Westport has been driven at a great pace by a very strong state Labor government. This is a project that appears very much on the fast track, and the West Mundijong area is the key destination and focus. For us as a Shire to try and determine what's our correct role at this stage, I think is premature. We need a better line of sight on Westport, and I think that's not far away. Westport is a freight train coming down the tunnel. It is going to move very quickly, and it'll have huge strategic implications on the area, and it will be driven by the state government. And I think we should strongly advocate to wait until we have more information in the new year on the Westport context in particular, before we go out with a premature discussion paper on a whole range of hypotheticals, which might be just completely irrelevant when Westport comes through very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor D'Agostino. Is there any councillors that would like to speak for the motion? Councillor Duggan.
Thanks, Madam President. Certainly, Councillor D'Agostino, I hear your concerns and I've shared them. They have gnawed at me a little too. And I guess my question, which I did raise earlier before this evening's meeting, is this discussion paper being brought around at the right time? Is this too early? But I've always advocated for community engagement, so it would not reflect my my views if I did not say that community engagement is something that we should be doing early. And you know, hopefully we can use that to then guide the next step. And if we need to go to further community engagement, as was indicated to me earlier, that is not a significant extra cost, as it would not use external consultants. I commend the parts of the motion that have come from Councillor Strange. I can see where she is looking outside the box and showing initiatives on different ways that we can actually provide incentives to get this this off the ground and moving and forward as we all want it to be. I understand too that there is, on the surface, it does look like it's somewhat of a quirky mix to be looking at road upgrades at the same time as a discussion paper.
But I can also see where in the discussion paper we are talking about incentives and what we can do to make this area grow. And of course, with Councillor Stroughton's components to the motion, it's no secret that I back environmental causes, and to have that as being a integral part of this motion, I think is incredibly important. And I do hope that there is some look in the future for the businesses that develop there to look at roof solar for car chargers in the car park for these 13,500 staff that are looking to be working in this development. And so with that, I shall I shall support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there any councillors that would like to speak against the motion? Thank you, Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Madam President. And I know we should all come into this place being completely objective and not knowing how we're going to vote until we sit here and listen to the debate. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. But on the record, this is certainly the case of the former for me. I was at sixes and sevens on how to vote on this and how to move forward. And I think the comments that have been made tonight have echoed strongly in my decision-making process. The West Mundijong area may well be the panacea. It may well create 13,000 jobs. It may well create $4 million in revenue by rates, and that's a good thing. That's an outstanding thing. And I think the work that previous councils have done in relation to alternate motion has some merit. However, what looms large for me is the fact that this is, I don't know if blend is the right word, but there's some mixed suggestions, I should say, in this motion in terms of the road upgrades and the community consultation. The road upgrade for me is of concern. Quite simply, it is of concern. It wasn't that long that we sat here and we were high-fiving each other about the road upgrade for that roundabout. Now to come back and say we need to find another $160,000, if that is correct, is of concern to me. And I will make the comment that I was quoted on earlier this evening, and that is the Shire has no money. The money that we have is ratepayers' money. So I think it's a little bit premature to go out to community consultation. Community consultation is good. Community engagement is outstanding. But the worst thing we can do is go out to the community at the wrong time. Go out to the community at the wrong time with the wrong information, because all that does is sets up the community for an expectation that is not correct, that's not accurate. We can't do that. We have reputational damage in going out to the community with information that's not accurate. And I think the key thing as well is Westport. And at the Q&A before tonight's meeting, Westport was mentioned. And a comment was made, well, you could defer it because then we'll get some more information about Westport. That is a critical point, councillors. If we defer this, we can get more information about Westport, find out, dot the I's, cross the T's, and understand what Westport means. Understand what the road upgrades mean. Understand what this actually means for the community and for us. Community consultation needs to be in the right place, right time, with the right information. I can't support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Is there any councillors that would like to speak for the motion? Councillor Mack?
Clarify, if you could direct to the relevant director that we heard it foreshadowed about deferring the motion so we can PCF it to potentially get better community engagement and have a discussion paper that goes out. Other than meeting the timeline for the KPIs for the CEO, are there any other disadvantages to that deferral?
Mr. Martin?
No, other than the road upgrades, but I don't think they would be necessarily impacted by that.
Thank you.
Are there any other councillors that would like to speak for the motion? I will speak for the motion. Firstly, I congratulate both Councillor Strange and Councillor Stroughton's in the alternate motion from Councillor Strange and the amendment put forward by Councillor Stroughton's. I think they are both value adding to what the officers have put forward to council. I don't see that the information contained in the discussion paper is wrong. I see the information there as actually being correct information that we are going out to our community to ask questions about what they see as the Shire's role moving forward with the West Mundijong Industrial Area development. Taking into consideration that the Shire does not own any of the land and it is privately held land, I think it is a very relevant question to ask our community of what they want to see the Shire do in this space, whether they want the Shire to be involved, in what direction they want to see the Shire be involved, knowing full well that the more industrial commercial development we have in the Shire takes the pressure off residential rates for everyone in the Shire. The road upgrades, whether this was before us or not before us, Mundijong Road is getting worse. It is very difficult for trucks of any size to actually traverse Mundijong Road where the roller coasters have started, the same as what they were on Rowley Road. And I have every faith in our Director of Infrastructure, who was the brave person that was able to find a fix for Rowley Road when a lot of other people had actually walked away and put it in the too hard basket. Not only did he find a fix, he actually found a fix that was relative to the project cost effective. So the road upgrades for Mundijong Road, whether it is part of this development or whether it is part of something else, need to be done. The upgrade to the roundabout at Cargottage, Mundijong Road, I think councillors need to take stock of the fact of how long the time frame is when we start to put together applications for road funding, be it the regional road group funding or whether it be black spot at state or federal level. It is a considerable time frame to when we start the work, we gather the information, we make application, and then we are given the go ahead or not for those projects. So it could have been 5 or 6 years ago when that process started for that roundabout. We are a considerable way down the track now with the development of the West Mundijong Industrial Area. So I actually commend the officers for the information they've put forward in this. I don't see it as being a messy item. I actually think there is 2 very relevant pieces to the recommendation that has been put forward, and I think that has only been positively added to with the amendments put forward by both Councillor Strange and Councillor Strawtons. Thank you.
Madam President, could I ask a question, please?
Councillor D'Agostino.
Would the mover and seconder consider including paragraph 2 from option 2 of the officer's paper, which relates to requesting the CEO to write to the subdivider seeking a $45,000 contribution to the upgrade, based on the officer's comments on page 8, that the council may consider that the subdivider as a direct beneficiary may be required to make a financial contribution to such works. So if I could just ask if the mover and seconder would consider amending their resolution to include that wording.
Before I ask them if they would, I'm going to ask for clarification from the Director of Development Services. My understanding, any financial money put forward by the developer would not be just a one-off payment. It would actually come out of the developer contribution plan for that area. Am I correct in my understanding of that?
Thank you for the question. Option 2, or that portion of option 2, was intended to just identify an additional funding source other than municipal funds. So there would be, in addition to that payment, if the developer did agree to make that contribution, they would also need to make their full developer contribution payment in accordance with the local planning scheme. So it would be in addition to.
So in addition to whatever they have to pay
That's
through the developer contribution plan?
Correct.
Thank you. Councillor Strange and Councillor Stratton.
Madam President, just have a question there. Given the developer has a subdivision approval, in terms of this request to the CEO write to him requesting the money, he can quite simply say no.
Director?
Yes, that's correct.
Madam President, I don't see any harm in adding the request in. We have no legal power to require the contribution to be made, but I can't see a problem with requesting it.
Madam President, Councillor Stroughton's here. I second Councillor Strange's comments.
Thank you, councillors.
Just so we're all clear, we're now adding that point into the motion.
Yes.
And if the, I'm just going to make sure we're all very clear. So if the developer writes back and says, no, thank you very much, I'll let you pay for it. The motion as it stands now has council funding the entire amount of that.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any councillors that would like to speak against the motion?
Sorry, Madam President, I just want to ask a question. It's a bit hard sitting in the cheap seats here, but with that bit added, do we need to change that table with the $60,000? We're going to try and get $45,000 off the. So what happens if we get the 45 grand? What does that mean for that table?
We would, that's why I asked that point of clarification before, Councillor Cole. So the table would still stand. Council still making a budget amendment as per this motion and funding the works themselves. If the developer gives council 45,000, we will pick that up at a budget review and offset that money and probably put it back into the road reserve.
Is that written there somewhere?
Well, no, we would just do that as we would have to do. But the motion, as it says there, is the council is doing the budget amendment to fund the works, but it's going to write and ask for that money if the developer wants to do that.
Okay, thank you.
That would like to speak against the motion? Councillor Strange, would you like to close, please?
Thank you, Madam President. I have nothing further to add. I think we've had some really salient points put forward in favour of progressing this motion now. I'd just like to thank Councillor Stratton for his embellishments in relation to environmental considerations. I think that they make the motion a more robust and valuable motion. And yeah, with that, I'm happy to take it to the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Strange. All those in favour of this motion? All those against? Motion is carried 5-3. Can we please ask?
Madam President, can we please record the votes?
Can we please record the votes, Minute Secretary?
And councillor Strange, we will need a reason for the difference in the officer recommendation at some point. But councillor voting against were councillor Matt, councillor Cole and councillor Batterstein.
Can we please go to the top of the alternate motion?
I'll just scroll up. Top of the motion, please.
Councillor Atwell, the alternate motion
The reason would be, for the difference would be to ensure additional avenues to incentivise development are investigated, to add, comma, yeah, to add environmental considerations to the discussion paper, and to explore all potential funding sources for the road upgrade.
Thank you, councillor Strange. Can we please? Councillor Atwell, the alternate motion was carried 5-3. With the alternate motion components being added in part A, modifying part 5 of the discussion paper to list a further risk as follows. There is also a potential risk that the project may not proceed based on competition in the industrial land market that is growing in the southeast corridor of Perth. This could result in pressure being placed on the Shire to explore various incentives or even disincentives to drive development, such as differential rating. It would be important to consider how best to manage such levers in a way which creates flexibility, but also certainty for the project in attracting investment. B, inserting a new question 5A of the discussion paper as follows. In order to promote development taking place, would you consider differential rating methodologies to be an appropriate lever in which the Shire could utilise? For example, providing an incentive for land to be developed, improved versus land sitting undeveloped, unimproved. Yes, no, and please provide reasons for your answer. 2, endorses the discussion paper and accompanying questions as provided in attachment 1, subject to the following changes. C, modifies part 6 of the discussion paper to list a further partnering stakeholder of environmentally friendly suppliers. 3, add the following possible answers below to the question proposed in the original officer's recommendation. Question 1, yes, if my preferred options following are adopted. Question 2, leading the inclusion of sustainable energy supply towards net zero carbon emissions. Question 3, the Shire will be able to reduce rate burden on ratepayers via the gaining of energy supply income. Question 4, the Shire will contribute to global warming unless the Shire works towards a net zero emission industrial area. Question 6, engage with innovative, sustainable energy supply organisations to supply and manage towards net zero emissions and income for the Shire. Question 7, information on how net zero emissions are being achieved. And the final point at the end is number 6, request the Chief Executive Officer to write to the subdivider of WAPC reference 159480, seeking a $45,000 contribution to be able to undertake the Mundijong Road pavement dip rehabilitation and Mundijong Road, Cargottage Road interim roundabout upgrade. Ten point 1.10, Mundijong F1 precinct structure plan deferral of project. Can I please have a mover for this item? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Strange. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.1.11, dog exercise area, lot 8053, Shoreline Boulevard, Byford. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Strawtons. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.2, infrastructure services reports. 10.2.1, minutes of the Rivers Regional Council meeting held on the 20th of October 2022. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Strawtons. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Bias. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.2.2, new lease 1 Evelyn Street, Mundijong, Mundijong Sale Yards.
Madam President, I'm proposing an alternate motion as has been distributed.
Thank you, Councillor Strawtons. Do we have a seconder for the alternate motion put forward by Councillor Strawtons? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Thank you, Councillor D'Agostino. Councillor Strawtons, would you like to open debate?
Thank you, Madam President. My addition to the officer's recommendation is just seeking to be explicit that the terms of the lease, the formal lease, are communicated to Emergency Management Committee so that they can know they have legal right to make use of the land in the event of emergency or natural disaster, actual or possible. Up till now, up to this lease, there's been an informal agreement and they may not have known that they can make use of the land, actual or possible, So I think it's important to inform them explicitly. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Staughton. Councillor Duggan, would you like to speak or reserve?
Rather than speak, if I could first ask a question, please. I note that it's the request that's been added in point 3 is that the Chief Executive Officer inform the emergency services through the local emergency management committee. Is there an intention to include this as part of the new lease so that the lessee is aware of their requirements to provide the facility, please?
Mr. Martin?
Madam President, that's not what the motion says currently. For that to be occurring, that the motion would have needed to say authorise the CEO to execute the lease with the following amendment. But that's not what that says now.
Madam President, can I please add some clarification to that question? No, it's clarification. Simply to answer that question by saying the lease already does include this term. It's, if I recall it correctly, it's point 34.1 in the lease. So the leasee is explicitly informed of the access rights they must allow.
Thanks very much. I'm happy to reserve.
Duggan, councillor D'Agostino?
Thanks, Madam President. I've sent through a range of questions. I've got some significant concerns on this lease. And unfortunately, the officers, and I understand it's difficult, there's some quite detailed questions, haven't been able to address those. I think at a wholesome level, the problem I have with this document, and there are many, is that it seems to be represented in the paper that the only really cost to ratepayers and to the Shire is to pay $30,000 to the toilet blocks, and I think that's what the resolution says. Yet when I read through the lease and the document, I have some significant concerns about potential additional costs. And I'll give you some examples of those. One is clause 9.1 about the preparation of the lease. Now, as those of us that are commercially minded know, when you have a lease, normally the lessee pays those costs. In this case, it appears that we've paid the legal costs of preparing the lease. We don't know what cost that has been to ratepayers, but that's another cost over and above the 30,000. In Annexure B, there's a whole range of obligations on the lessor, and the lessor is the Shire. So, for example, the lessor, the Shire, has to undertake any necessary pet inspections. So this is over and above the 30 grand for the toilets. The Shire has to deal with any vandalism and graffiti on the toilets and the boundary fencing. So that's over and above what's on the toilets. The lessor must arrange annual inspections of the premises for FISA and DFES. And there's a really important one here, that
Madam President, point of order, is this in the confidential attachment that we're discussing these items? I just want to make sure that we're not actually discussing particulars that are in the confidential. I just want to make sure, Madam President.
The lease. Yeah.
That's confidential. Yeah. That's a confidential matter, Madam President.
If a procedural motion, 12.1, that council proceed to the next business, can I please have a seconder for this motion? Yeah, thank you, councillor Coles. All those in favour? Councillor Staughton, are you voting or not? Thank you. Motion is carried unanimously. we please have councillor Atwell return to the chamber, please? Councillor Atwell, item 10.2.2 has had a procedural motion of council to proceed to the next business move in place of the motion continuing. So we will move to item 10.2.3, award request for tender RFT 07 2022 bulk bin services, Watkins Road transfer station. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, councillor Coles. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, councillor Bias. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Thank you, councillor D'Agostino. Councillor Coles, can you please open debate?
Thank you, Madam President. I have seen the emails, and I won't say too much. I'm sure there'll be someone here that dobs me in for talking about confidential items, so I won't go any further in relation to the concerns. But what I will say is there only was the two, actually, no, I can't. I'm just going to support what the officer say. I'm not going to say anything else, otherwise I'll be in trouble for talking about confidential items. So I'll just commend the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, councillor Coles. Councillor Byers, would you like to speak or reserve?
Reserve, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor D'Agostino.
Thanks, Madam President. Taking into account the confidentiality aspects, my concern is just understanding the quantum difference between these two contracts, because the problem I have is that we don't know what our forecast volumes are for 23-24, and we don't know what our forecast volumes are for 24-25. So I just find it very difficult, if not impossible, to form a judgment on comparing the commercial implications of these two contracts when we don't know what we're comparing. So in terms of volume, so that's the commercial conundrum I face myself in terms of I'm trying to compare the potential successful applicants, and I just don't feel we've got enough information to form a judgment on who the contract should be awarded to. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor D'Agostino. Is there any councillors that would like to speak for the motion? Councillor Coles, would you like to close, please?
I'll commend the motion.
Thank you. All those in favour? All those against? Motion is carried 6-3. Item 10.2.4.
Sorry, Madam President, can we please have those votes recorded? Thank you.
Minute Secretary, can we please record the votes? Thank you. Item 10.2.4, award request for tender RFT 09 2022 cleaning services Serpentine Jarrahdale. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, councillor Bias. Can I please have a seconder for this motion? Thank you, councillor Duggan. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.3, corporate services reports. 10.3.1, confirmation of payment of creditors October 2022. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, councillor Duggan. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, councillor bias. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.3.2, monthly financial report, September 2022. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Stratton. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.3.3, Serpentine, September 2022 quarterly budget review. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Coles. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Bias. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.3.4, Corporate Business Plan Performance Report, July to September 2022. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Bias. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.3.5, award request for tender RFQ 17/2022, Senior Project Manager. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Stratton. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.4, Community Engagement Reports, 10.4.1, Local Emergency Management Committee Information Report. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Stratton. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Atchwell. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.5, Executive Services Reports, which there is nil. Item 10.6, Confidential Reports. Can I please have a mover to close the chamber? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor D'Agostino. All those in favour? 2, 3, 4. Motion is carried unanimously.